So I looked at a website this week called Secret Regrets. It's basically the sacrament of confession, but for Facebook. So the idea is you go online, you post a mistake that you made, and then you tell strangers how badly you feel about it. I'll read you a few entries. So a 42-year-old female said this: "I regret that I didn't go to therapy sooner. I could have talked things over with you when you were alive. I miss you, Papa." 26-year-old male said this: "I regret not being there for you when you had surgery for cancer. I was 13, angry and scared. You died at 49, and I never got the chance to apologize for being such a terrible son. I love you, Mum, and always will. I regret sending a flirtatious text to my co-worker that started this whole mess. I regret allowing it to continue. I regret getting pregnant and not telling you. I regret not spending my birthday with you. I regret not making a stronger effort to go to therapy with you. I regret taking the ring off." So you get the idea. It sounds like a cheesy country song, but making mistakes is part of life. None of us are perfect. None of us get life right all the time. We make mistakes. That's who we are. That's what we do. But what's weird about it is that our mistakes create tension. And it's this tension that we've been talking about over the past few weeks, this cognitive dissonance, this thing we're forced to deal with when we hold two conflicting truths at the same time. So, for example, I am a competent professional, but I just made a stupid error. I'm a good person who believes in good morals and smart decisions, but I just did a really bad, immoral thing. I'm a loyal wife, but I just had an incredibly disloyal conversation. How do I deal with this tension? This morning we're going to look at the well-known words of the 51st Psalm. The words begin by telling us that what we're about to read was written for the director of music. In other words, what we're about to read this morning is the lyrics to a song. And we're further told that these lyrics come out of an episode in the life of a man called David, a particular episode in which the prophet Nathan came to him after he had committed adultery with Bathsheba. So straight away in the opening title of the song, we discover that it's a song of regret. It's one of the so-called penitential psalms, and I think it's one of the best regret songs ever written, even better than something Leonard Cohen could do. And there's a spoiler in the title. What we're about to read comes from the blackest episode in the life of one of the Bible's greatest characters. And these words explore two things. Number one, they explore the emotional turmoil of regret and guilt. The tension of living with being two versions of yourself at the same time. A good person who's just done a bad thing. And number two, they explore the far reach of God's salvation and forgiveness. Now, in weeks 1 and 2 of this series, we looked at this same episode in a narrative book of the Bible, the book of Samuel. Now we're going to look at in a poetic section of the Bible. And what's amazing and brilliant about this is that this was probably written decades after the events it describes. So this is very well thought out. This is a very deep exploration of how regret feels, of how the tension of being two persons at the same time looks like on the inside of a person's life. So, he says this: "Have mercy on me, O God, according to your unfailing love. According to your great compassion, blot out my transgressions. Wash away my iniquity and cleanse me from my sin. So we know that this good man has done a bad thing that he regrets. And in this sentence he says, I feel my regret in two ways. First of all, I feel as if God has kept a written record of the thing that I've done. I feel that not only has God seen my mistakes, but that he remembers them as well. And this is not an unreasonable feeling in all likelihood. After all, in the best traditions of theology, God is all-seeing and all-knowing. So when this man says, I'd like for God to blot out his record of my mistakes, he's asking for God to do a rather big thing. He's asking for God to unknow what he knows, to unsee what he's already seen, to forget what he's all too aware of. He's asking for it to be like it never happened. Then he says, I would also like God to wash me, to cleanse me. This is interesting language. He clearly feels that this thing he's done has somehow formed a stain on the inside of himself. And now, post-mistake, it's as if every time he looks at himself in the mirror, he feels it. He feels that he's not the man he thought he was. He's not the person he once wished to be. And so the word he uses for clean here is a very vigorous word. This is the word that a woman would use when talking about the marinara stain on her husband's white shirt. The sort of stain that a gentle wash will not touch. The sort of stain that requires her to reach for her grandmother's washboard. It's a rather vigorous word, an intense word. So here's how his mistake feels on the inside of him. Here's the word he uses to describe his inner tension. I don't like living with myself anymore. I feel like I need to be scrubbed. And notice, please, that in asking for God to clean him, in asking for God to blot out the written record of his wrongdoing, he uses the word mercy. So this is the language, I think, of pure regret. This is an acknowledgement that I can't undo what I did. I did it. It was wrong. If I had a time machine, I like to think I'd do things differently, but I probably wouldn't. I'd probably do exactly the same thing over again. So, I've got no defense. I'm throwing up my hands and I'm saying, God, please have mercy on me. And in doing this, he's not taking a shot in the dark. Asking God for mercy is not a game, it seems, of long odds. It is, in fact, to ask God to do what God does. It's like going into an ice cream store and asking the vendor for ice cream. That's the product they're in. So this is why the lyrics say, I'm asking for mercy because God is a God of unfailing love. The phrase unfailing love is an English translation of the Hebrew word chesed. And when the writers of the Bible spoke about the chesed of God, they were speaking about how the loyalty of God always supersedes the disloyalty of his people. So if I were to say to you that God will treat you according to his chesed, what I would be saying to you specifically is that the measure of your faithfulness towards God does not determine the measure of God's faithfulness towards you. Because God has already decided that he will love you forever. And there is, it seems, nothing that you can do that will change God's mind on that key issue. He loves you because he loves you because he loves you. He's already decided it, and he's not going to change his mind, irrespective of how you do or don't behave. This is the scandal of the love of God in the Bible. So what the writer is saying here then is God, I've heard that you're a God who loves me. I've heard that you even love me when I have not loved you. And so on the basis of the kind of God that you clearly are, I'm asking you to do what you do and give me mercy. I'm asking you to behave in the way that you always behave and be kind to me. And then in that same vein, he goes on to talk about the compassion of God. In the ancient world, this language was the quintessential language of motherhood. So, all things being equal, in a normal parent-child relationship, there is a bond between a mother and a child that far outweighs the unfortunate events of life. To talk about the bond between a mother and a child is to talk about something primal, something innate. Those of you who have children know something of this bond. As a parent, you can know that you may disapprove of something your child does, and you often do. As a parent, you know that you can be hurt by what your child does, and you often are. But you also know that at a primitive level of your soul, running far deeper than your disapproval and your hurt, is a love for your child that endures pretty much anything and everything. And even though they have done wrong, you still wish the best for them. Even though they have hurt you, you still harbour for them nothing but good wishes and good intentions. Multiply that by 1,000 and you get close to understanding what the Bible means when it talks about the feelings that God has for you and for me at the moment of our mistakes. To see what this song is saying then. God, I know that your loyalty to me exceeds my disloyalty to you. And I know that even though I am suffering under the cruel hand of my own stupidity again, you have for me nothing but good wishes and intentions. And on that basis, I have something to ask. Next sentence. Against you and you only have I sinned and done what is evil in your sight. So you are right in your verdict and justified when you judge. So follow the logic. The writer of the song has done something he should not have done. God has responded to that wrongdoing by issuing a verdict of guilt or punishment or whatever. Sentence has been passed. And here in this line of the song, the writer says, yes, God is right in his judgment. All of the negative things, I deserve them. I made a mistake. The responsibility is mine. And yet nonetheless, he's pressing God to change his mind about the judgment he's passed. He seems to be saying, my understanding of God is that judgment never has the last word. My understanding of God is that the last word is always a word of hope. There is always hope. There is always hope. Now we, I think, find it so very hard to do what this writer does. So in week 1 of this series, what did I ask you to do? I asked you to think about the things you're not thinking about. I asked you to think about the things you're ignoring. I asked you to think about the things that are there in the corner of your eye and you're kind of half aware that you should probably look at those things and probably deal with those things, but you don't because they're in your blind spot. I asked you to look about those and to think about those. But we probably didn't. And I couldn't because I was too busy thinking about you. Right? There's always a reason why we can get out of dealing with the things we should be dealing with and owning up to the things we should be owning up to. This is entrenched in us. It is so extraordinarily difficult for us to deal with the tension that arises from, I'm a good person who did a bad thing. And so we typically deal with this tension by ignoring it and dismissing the bad thing as being due to circumstances or someone else's fault. So that way I'm still a good person, but the bad thing I did, that wasn't me, that was them, that was the situation, that was the stress. And the greater our responsibility is, the more entrenched this hardness becomes. So, for example, in 1840, hospitals in Vienna struggled with a mysterious epidemic that killed 15% of mothers whose babies were delivered by doctors. This was 3 times the mortality rate of those whose babies were delivered by midwives. At the height of this crisis, a young Hungarian doctor came up with a theory to explain this mysterious disease. He noticed that doctors were going from performing autopsies on dead mothers straight to the delivery room without washing their hands. And so although this was a time before people knew about germs and all that sort of thing, he came up with a theory that they might be transferring what he interestingly called a death poison from the autopsy room to the delivery room. And so he suggested to doctors that maybe they should wash their hands in chlorine and that would solve the problem. The medical community immediately reacted with outrage. How dare you? See, here's the situation. I'm a doctor. I save lives. My patients are dying. It cannot be my fault. And because it cannot be my fault, I will remain blind to the solution to the problem. Every position of responsibility struggles in the same way. When you make a parenting mistake, it's far easier to blame that mistake on the situation and on the circumstances than it is on yourself. When you screw up as a business leader or as an entrepreneur, it's far easier to blame your mistake on stress or on the market than it is on yourself. And this avoidance of our blind spot is so unnecessary and so counterproductive. It's the very thing that makes us stay stuck. Wayne Hale, who you've probably never heard of, was the launch control manager of NASA when 7 astronauts died in the Columbia disaster. In a public email to members of the space program following this disaster, he took full responsibility. Let me read you what he said in an open email to all of his colleagues, to everyone at NASA. Here's what he said. I had the opportunity and the information, and I failed to make use of it. I don't know what an inquest or a court of law would say, but I stand condemned in the court of my own conscience for not preventing the Columbia disaster. We could discuss the particulars, inattention to detail, laziness, incompetence, lack of conviction, lack of understanding, but the bottom line is that I am guilty of allowing the Columbia crash. You would think that would be a career-ending email, which is why you would never send it. Some years later, NASA promoted William Hale to the head of their space launch program because they correctly understood, here's a guy who people will follow. A guy who can own up to his mistakes and learn from them and not hide behind them and ignore what's wrong. That's a guy I'm going to listen to. That's a guy that will take us places. Imagine for a moment how you would feel if your partner or your parents or your child said to you, I want you to know that I'm taking responsibility for the mistake that I made. You were right, and I was wrong. Or if your employer said to you, I want you to know that I was so wrong on that issue. And not only am I owning up for the mistake I made, I want your advice on how we can take this project forward and make this business succeed. Imagine how you'd feel if you turned on your television set and a Crown attorney was standing outside a courtroom and said, "I and my team have made an awful mistake and sent an innocent man to jail. And not only am I taking full responsibility for this, I'm going to change procedures so that this can never happen again." How would you feel about those people if they said those things? Would your respect for them go up or down? Would you trust them less or more? The last American president to apologize to his country was John F. Kennedy. In the early 60s, he listened to the faulty claims of his military and intelligence advisors, who assured him that once troops landed in the Bay of Pigs, the Cuban people would rejoice and overthrow Castro. The invasion, as you know, was a disaster, but Kennedy learned from it. He made changes to the intelligence community, changes that prevented him from making a further disaster in the subsequent missile crisis. Speaking at this time, Kennedy said on live television, "This administration intends to be candid about its mistakes." Since when did governments make mistakes? Do you ever hear that language anymore? This administration intends to be candid about its mistakes, and I have to tell you that the responsibility of the failure for the Bay of Pigs was mine and mine alone. Can you imagine any world leader talking like that today? We live with this disease of having to pretend to be infallible. And it's so stupid because everyone knows we're not. As soon as Kennedy said this on television, his approval ratings soared. This was the height of his popularity. When he owned his mistakes, he was never trusted more, never admired more. So here's the king in this song. Here's the religious leader in this song. And he says, next sentence, "Surely I was sinful at birth, sinful from the time my mother conceived me. Yet you desire faithfulness in the womb. You taught me wisdom in the secret place." So what he means in this sentence is not that his sin was communicated to him via the vaginal tract of his mother or via his father at the point of insemination or anything like that. What he simply means is, this is who I am back to the beginning of my story. This is a poetic way of saying doing the wrong thing. It just comes naturally to me. I can't seem to help it. It's me. And then he says in the next sentence that God's wishes for him have always been the complete antithesis of that. So this is a man in the middle years of life saying, I know that God always wanted me to do the right thing. And you know what? So did I. I'm a good person. You know, deep down I want to be a better man. I want to be the person I always thought I would be and make better choices and do right things. That is, I think, who I genuinely am. But I just can't help being an idiot. It comes naturally to me. I did a wedding a few weeks ago. This isn't in the script, but the bride and groom being here this morning reminded me of it. Hello, bride and groom. So I'm standing, I'm just preparing, I say this to my shame, which may be a psychological way of getting you to admire me, but anyway, we'll see. So I'm talking to one of the groom's family before the wedding, and he very politely noticed that I'd lost some weight. And I think at the height of my weight, I was 268 pounds. And I think I'm somewhere, I know exactly what I am now, but that's how it is for me now, but I'm now like 218, something like that, and a half. Anyway, that's not the point. The point is, I think at my heaviest I was 268. I was talking to this fella about this, and I said, yeah, I was 300 pounds. I'm not a liar, but I lied. Oh, what are we all, nuns now? Wipe that look of disapproval of your face, because you know this feeling as well. In different contexts. I'm standing at the front of this beautiful church, watching a very beautiful bride walk down the aisle, and I'm not thinking of the first words that are going to come out of my mouth when she gets to the bottom of the aisle. I'm thinking, what was that? Why am I like that? Why? Do you ever do that? This is how he's feeling here. I am a good man. My whole life has been spent in a certain trajectory towards decency and morality and helping and making the world a better place for people. That is genuinely me. And yet this other thing is genuinely me as well. And God, I'm so tired of it. I'm so ashamed of it. How do I deal with this tension then? Do I blame it on circumstances or other people, or do I ignore it? Is it either or is there a third way? In the 1980s, the Israeli Prime Minister Shimon Peres was thrown into this dissonance by his good friend and ally Ronald Reagan. Peres was furious that Reagan had accepted an invitation from the German government to visit a German war grave, a war cemetery, which happened to contain, among others, the remains of 49 Waffen-SS officers. Now, this visit was supposed to symbolise the reconciliation between America and Germany since the end of World War II, but Peres, like the rest of the Israeli nation, was rightly outraged. How does Peres deal with this then? Does he blame it on pressure that Reagan was under? Or does he ignore it? He chooses neither. When reporters asked Peres what he thought of Reagan's actions, he neither condemned Reagan personally nor minimised the seriousness of his feelings on the issue. Instead, he took a third and a better way. Listen to what he said. He said, when a friend makes a mistake, the friend remains a friend. The mistake remains a mistake. When a friend makes a mistake, the friend remains a friend. The mistake remains a mistake. So consider this then. When I, a decent, smart person, do an indecent, dumb thing, I remain a decent, smart person. And the indecent, dumb thing remains an indecent, dumb thing. When I, a good parent, make a parenting mistake, I remain a good parent. But the mistake remains a mistake. When I, a good decision maker, make a bad decision, I remain a good decision maker. That's still me. But the bad decision, it remains a bad decision. This is better, I think, than either ignoring the mistake or of wallowing in it. In 1944, the Supreme Allied Commander in Europe, Dwight Eisenhower, had to make a very specific decision on the timing of the D-Day landings. He knew that the invasion of Normandy would be expensive under the best of circumstances, and circumstances were far from ideal. He knew that if the invasion failed, not only would thousands of troops be lost, but the humiliation of the defeat would set the war effort back, perhaps irrevocably. Nonetheless, we now know that Eisenhower was prepared in advance to accept full responsibility for a defeat that never happened. He wrote a short speech that he planned to release in the event that the invasion failed. Here's what he was going to say. Our landings in Normandy have failed to gain a satisfactory foothold, and the troops have been withdrawn. My decision, notice the word my decision to attack at this time was based upon the best information available. The troops, Air Force and Navy did all that bravery and devotion could do. But if any fault or blame attaches to the attempt, it is mine, and mine alone. Would you follow a guy like that? A guy who can own it? A guy who can say it was me? I would. Next sentence. The king, the leader, he says, "Cleanse me with hyssop and I shall be clean." So in the nomadic cultures of the ancient world, if someone died in your tent, it was thought to be bad luck. I guess it was bad luck for them too. And to remove this bad luck, you would get a friend to go into the tent with a hyssop plant, and they would sprinkle water in some kind of cleansing ritual around the tent. So what this line is saying is, God, I would like you to be a friend to me. And I would like you to make my life livable again. Because post-mistake, I'm thrown into this tension situation between these two versions of me, and right now it just doesn't feel livable in my own skin. So be a friend, God. And while you're at it, God, notice what he says next. I would like you to hide your face from my sins. In the Bible, we almost never ask God to hide his face. In fact, we almost always do the reverse. When we're in trouble, we scream at God and ask him to look at us. God, I'm dying down here. Will you turn your face towards me? Is the typical big language in the Bible. Will you notice what I'm going through? Don't you see how I'm suffering? Don't you see how I'm struggling? God, turn your face towards me. But here he says, God, I'd like you to help me, but not look at me. This is the language of the diaper change. Remember your body language when you were changing a particularly smelly one? Guys, remember? You're doing this with your hands, but you're kind of like this. This is how he feels about who he is. I'm so tired of being this way that I'd like you to help me, but don't look at me. Then we get to the heart of the matter. He says, create in me a pure heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit inside me. You see what he's saying here? He's saying, I make wrong choices. That's part of who I am, I guess. And I know enough about myself now to know that that's part of who I am. And it feels like it's too late for me to change. It feels like this silly paradigm is fixed. So God, I'm asking not only for you to cleanse me this one time and make my skin livable again, I'm asking you to help me become a new person. To become the person I aspire to be. And that, friends, is a sentence you can never speak until you pluck up the courage to explore your blind spot. Until you look into the dark shadow in the corner of your eye and notice the things you should be noticing. And explore what's in the corners that you've been ignoring for far too long. Until you do that, you can never say, I'm ready to change. I'm ready to do better. I'm ready to fix this. Then he says, don't cast me from your presence or take your spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of salvation and grant me a willing spirit to sustain me. Then I'll teach transgressors your ways, so sinners will turn back to you. So, question in the Bible, who is it that most interests God? Who arouses God's professional interest the most? It is people like you and I, the broken, the damaged, the sinful. Another question, what are the ways of God that he wishes to teach? What does God most want from those in whom he is interested? Well, very simply, he wants them to turn back from their stupidity and stop being that version of themselves that they were never meant to be. He wants them to discover not only forgiveness, but a new life and a fresh start. So what this man is saying is, I want to heal, but as a wounded healer. I want to teach wisdom as someone who has lacked it for so very long. I want to tell the story of the fresh start that God gives, as one who is all too grateful of having gotten it. And this song, I think, tells, frankly, astonishing things about the kind of God that God is. In the Hebrew poem, the first word in the song is mercy. When the Bedouins... I'm about to tell you something about Bedouins and camels, which will make you think I don't have a social life. That I know that. Anyway, here's what I know about Bedouins and camels. So when Bedouin camels give birth to baby camels, the Bedouins separate them from their mothers at a very, very young age. When they're only just a few weeks old, they're taken away from their mothers and they're taught to do camel-like things, like, I don't know, carry things on their humps, and they get used to wearing bits in their mouths and so on and so forth. And during this training period, they're always separated quite severely from their mothers. They're kept in a corner of the camp up from the prevailing wind so that their mothers can't even smell them. And apparently at night, the mother camels are so distressed by this that they make the most hideous scream. The word for this scream that the Bedouin use is hanana. This is the Arabic version of the Hebrew word that begins this psalm, Hananiah. Mercy, mercy, mercy. Could it be that this cry does not only in these sentences ascend from broken earth to heaven, but also from heaven to broken earth? Is it too much to imagine of God that he himself makes this noise of us and of people like us? I am distressed at your pain. I am distressed at how disconnected we are. I am distressed at what this brokenness is doing to you, at the kind of person it is making you. It upsets me more than it upsets you. Could it be that is what our God is like? And here's why this matters. The second you say, I was wrong, and I am taking responsibility, is the second you begin to fix the wrongness and undo the brokenness. The second you say, I was blind, is the second you can no longer ignore what you haven't been seeing. And down that road, however hard that road is to travel, and I know it is, lies healing and peace and ultimately success. Do we have time for questions? We don't. We didn't 5 minutes ago. Thank you for coming. God bless you. See you next Sunday. Sorry for my noise.